These are 5 Mercedes-Benz machines from the 1980s that rewrote every rule about what a car with a 3-pointed star on the hood was supposed to be. This is before AMG was a checkbox on a configurator, before the G-Wagon became a cultural status symbol, before Mercedes had any real performance credibility whatsoever. These cars clawed that reputation into existence with raw horsepower, questionable aerodynamics, and the kind of audacity that only the excess of the 1980s could produce. Let's start with the car that literally invented the concept of a Mercedes-Benz hot rod. In 1986, Mercedes had a problem. BMW had just dropped the first generation M5, and the automotive press was falling over itself to praise it. The M5 was fast, refined, and German, and Mercedes didn't have a single thing in its lineup that could answer it. Not one car in the entire product portfolio that could be called a genuine performance sedan. That's when 2 former Daimler-Benz engineers named Hans Werner Aufrecht and Erhard Melcher decided to do something about it. They'd founded a little tuning shop back in 1967, naming it after the first letters of their surnames plus a G for Grossespach, Aufrecht's hometown. That shop was AMG, and in 1986 they went to war with BMW. What they did was take a perfectly respectable W124 E-Class sedan and commit engineering violence upon it. They ripped out the inline-6 and shoved in a 5.6-liter 32-valve V8, but that was just the starting point. AMG offered 3 engine options to buyers. You could take the 5-liter V8 with their custom 4-valve heads, step up to 5.6 liters, or, if you were truly unhinged, go all the way to 6 liters of displacement. That final version, the 6.0-liter beast, produced close to 385 horsepower and 417 pound-feet of torque. And remember, that's in 1986. American automotive magazines dubbed it the Hammer. And here's the thing about that name. Hammer is the same word in both German and English. Mercedes loved it so much, they leaned into it, and the name stuck permanently. The numbers were totally nuts. 0 to 60 in 5 seconds flat, the quarter mile in 13.5 seconds, a top speed of 186 miles per hour. To put that in perspective, the AMG Hammer was 0.2 of a second faster to 60 than a Ferrari Testarossa. And in August of 1987, Road and Track ran a feature calling it a 4-door that runs like a Ferrari Testarossa. No doubt it was a stressful week in Maranello when that issue hit Enzo's desk. But these cars were not only rare, they were impossibly rare. Only 13 AMG Hammer sedans were ever built for the North American market. Only 5 coupes are believed to exist in the entire world. And the reliability? Let's just say that boring out those short blocks and raising the compression ratio to 10.5 to 1 turned these engines into, and this is a direct quote, very fast ticking time bombs. Head gasket failures, coolant, and oil leaks, all part of the ownership experience. You didn't buy a Hammer because you wanted something that made sense. You bought it because you wanted to terrify people at stoplights while wearing a suit. Today, these cars rank among the most valuable Mercedes ever built. One sold on the MB market in August 2025 for $761,800. 2 more, a sedan and a coupe, both with 6-liter engines and factory-equipped manual transmissions, the only 2 known to have them, were estimated between $1.25 million to $2 million at Amelia Island. The Hammer went from an aftermarket curiosity to a $1 million collector car. And one more story, because it's too good to leave out. One enthusiast tracked down a rare AMG Hammer coupe, bought it, and immediately took it on a road trip to Las Vegas. He got pulled over for speeding because, well, of course he did. During the stop, Illicit substances were discovered because, after all, it was the 80s and the car was seized by the DEA and put in a government impound lot. Now, the Hammer proved that Mercedes could build a hot rod, but the car that started Mercedes down the performance path in the first place was number 2 on this list, and it came from a much more unlikely place. In the early 1980s, Mercedes-Benz decided that its new compact sedan, the 190, would make the perfect rally car. The W201 had a low-drag body and a sophisticated multi-link rear suspension that was genuinely advanced for its time. To give it enough power, Mercedes turned to a legendary British engineering firm called Cosworth. The Northampton-based company designed a brand new twin-cam, 16-valve aluminum cylinder head for one of Mercedes's cast-iron 4-cylinder blocks, creating the 190E, 2.3 16-valve. The engine produced 185 horsepower and 173 pound-feet of torque from just 2.3 liters, naturally aspirated. It hit 62 miles per hour in 7.5 seconds, with a top speed of 143 miles per hour. Those numbers might not sound earth-shattering today, but in 1983, this was a 4-cylinder Mercedes sedan that could genuinely raise eyebrows. But the story takes a sharp turn right there. Before the 190E Cosworth ever kicked up a single grain of gravel on a rally stage, Audi showed up with the Quattro, 4-wheel drive and turbocharged. It changed the entire face of rallying overnight and rendered the rear drive 190 completely unfit as a rally weapon before it even had a chance to compete. Mercedes needed a new way to prove what this car could do, so they did 2 things, both of them audacious. First, in August of 1983, they took 3 190E, 2.316s, to the Nardo test track in southern Italy and ran them for 50,000 kilometers non-stop. The first car crossed the finish line after 201 hours, 39 minutes, and 43 seconds. They broke 11 endurance records and proved that the car worked. Then came the moment that would make this car immortal. On May 12, 1984, Mercedes organized what they called the Nürburgring Champions Mercedes-Benz Cup, 20 identical 190Es, 2.316 valve on the new Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit. 12 laps, some light rain, and 120,000 spectators. The grid was packed with the greatest racing drivers on the planet. Alain Prost, Niki Lauda, Carlos Reutemann, James Hunt, Jack Brabham, Sterling Moss, John Watson, Keke Rosberg. Legends, every one of them. The race was won by a 24-year-old kid from Sao Paulo who had never stood on a Formula One podium. A driver who had actually failed to qualify at the previous Grand Prix in San Marino. He'd been invited mostly to pad out the number of drivers. His name was Ayrton Senna. John Watson later remembered that Senna took it very, very seriously. His attitude was that he had to win it. And win it he did, in the rain, against the greatest drivers of multiple generations. Prost had qualified on pole with Senna second, and Prost later joked, "After that, he didn't talk to me anymore." This was actually the first time Prost and Senna ever met. Prost had picked Senna up from the airport and driven him 2 hours to the circuit, and they chatted on the way. It would be one of the last pleasant conversations they'd ever have. Mercedes kept the car Senna won in, and they still have it to this very day. It carries about 2,000 kilometers on the clock and rarely comes out for public display. The other 19 cars were sold to private buyers and scattered to the wind. The 190E 2.316 entered DTM racing in 1986 and won 2 races in its inaugural season, campaigned by a team run by a man named Helmut Marko. You might know that name. He's the man who now advises the Red Bull Formula One team. But Mercedes wanted more from the 190, and that desire led directly to the third car on this list. The Mercedes 190 E2.5 16 Evolution 2, or just the Evo 2. If the Cosworth 190E was a gentleman in a suit, the Evo 2 was that same gentleman after he'd been to prison and come back with something to prove. Unveiled at the Geneva Motor Show in March of 1990, the Evo 2 looked like absolutely nothing Mercedes had ever produced. Wide fender flares, a massive rear wing, height-adjustable suspension. Mercedes hired aerodynamics professor Richard Epler from the University of Stuttgart to design that aero package, and the result was so aggressive that DTM competitors formally protested, claiming it was illegal. Mercedes had to prove the car's road legality just to keep racing it. Under the hood sat a 2.5-liter naturally aspirated four-cylinder with double overhead cams, producing 232 horsepower at a screaming 7,200 revolutions per minute, with a red line of 7,800. Top speed was electronically limited to 155 miles per hour. In race trim, these engines produced 263 horsepower at 7,750 revolutions per minute. The Evo 2 delivered on every promise. In 1992, the 190E, in heavily modified AMG form, won 16 out of 24 races, and Klaus Ludwig took the DTM championship. 16 wins from 24 starts. That's not dominance. That's pure humiliation. Mercedes built exactly 502 examples for road use, as required by DTM homologation rules. 500 were painted in blue-black metallic. Just two, were finished in silver. Today they sell for over $500,000, with the highest recorded auction result sitting at $544,000 in November 2023. There's a modern postscript to this story worth knowing. HWAAG, the company founded by AMG co-founder Hans Werner Aufrecht himself, announced a Restomod called the HWA Evo. They're taking standard 190E donor cars and rebuilding them as modern tributes to the Evo 2. Only 100 will be made, starting at 714,000 euros, which is roughly $753,600. The first build slot sold at auction in Germany for 1.3 million euros for a Restomod 190E. That's pretty good if you ask me. Now, while the 190E scrapped for DTM glory, AMG was working on something at the complete opposite end of the Mercedes lineup. And that brings us to number 4, the Mercedes 560 SE CAMG 6.0 widebody. If the Hammer was AMG stuffing a V8 into a midsize sedan, the 560 SEC widebody was AMG taking Mercedes's biggest, most expensive, most luxurious coupe and turning it into something that looked like it wanted to eat you. The standard 560 SEC was already impressive. Mercedes's flagship coupe carried a 5.6-liter V8, producing around 300 horsepower, a top speed of 155 miles per hour, and a 0 to 60 time of 6.6 seconds. It was the most powerful production Mercedes-Benz had ever built up until that point. AMG looked at it and thought, not enough. They bored and stroked that V8 to a full 6 liters, fitted their signature 4-valve cylinder heads, and extracted 385 horsepower and 410 pound-feet of torque. Then came the wide-body kit, flared fenders, deeper bumpers, side skirts, basically the works. The result topped 177 miles per hour and hit 60 in under 6 seconds, all while looking like a luxury coupe that had been hitting the gym. This was built during the era when AMG was still fully independent, before any corporate oversight from Stuttgart, which meant every car was essentially hand-built and slightly different from the next. AMG originally planned to build 100 examples at $200,000 each in 1989 dollars. In the end, only about 50 were ever manufactured. Each one unique, though, and each one a rolling statement of excess. The highest recorded sale for a 560 SE AMG 6.0 widebody reached $720,000 in December 2022. For a car that was already outrageously expensive when new, that kind of appreciation tells you everything about what it means to collectors. And finally, number 5, the car that might be the most unlikely success story on this entire list. The Mercedes G-Wagon, or the Geländewagen. The idea was born in 1972 when Daimler-Benz partnered with Austrian manufacturer Steyr Daimler Puch to develop a rugged military vehicle. The suggestion actually came from the Shah of Iran, who at the time was one of Mercedes' largest shareholders. He wanted an off-road to military vehicle that could also appeal to civilians, and in 1979, Mercedes launched the first civilian version. The 1980s G-Wagon was a purely utilitarian machine. Body-on-frame construction, 3 locking differentials, the kind of off-road capability that made Land Rovers nervous. The German Bundeswehr adopted the military-spec 250GD variant and gave it a nickname, calling it the Wolf. The Pope made public appearances in a customized 230 GE. More than 50,000 G-Wagons were built in the first decade of production, purchased by armies, aid organizations, and adventurers who needed a vehicle that could go anywhere and survive anything. What makes the 1980s G-Wagon remarkable isn't its performance. It was slow, heavy, and about as aerodynamic as a filing cabinet. What makes it remarkable is that it survived to become one of the most iconic and desirable vehicles in the world. The same basic design, the same body-on-frame architecture is still in production today, making the G-Class the longest continuously produced Mercedes-Benz in history. It went from a military tool to a global status symbol, and its 1980s origins are the reason it carries a bulletproof credibility that no amount of marketing could ever manufacture. And there you have it. 5 completely different answers to the question of what a Mercedes could be. The Hammer that proved a sedan could outrun a Ferrari. The Cosworth 190E that launched Ayrton Senna's legend. The Evo 2 that dominated a racing championship so thoroughly that competitors tried to ban it. The 560 SEC widebody that made luxury genuinely intimidating. And the G-Wagon, a vehicle that was never supposed to be anything more than a military truck and became an icon anyway. This was the decade that transformed Mercedes-Benz from a company that built the world's finest luxury cars into a company that built the world's finest luxury cars that could also blow your pants off in a street race. These weren't careful, corporate-approved performance vehicles. These were true monsters, built by engineers and tuners who believed that the only right answer to "that's enough power" was, "let's see how much more we can squeeze out of this thing." And the strangest part? We're still chasing them. AMG Hammer is selling for $750,000. Evo 2s commanding over $500,000. Restamods priced at 1.3 million euros. The 1980s ended 35 years ago, but these 5 Mercedes machines are worth more now than they've ever been.